So, your designs in AR and VR are not working well. They stutter, they look terrible, and they really make people sick. Well, there's a dirty little skill that no one tells 3D designers, and if you don't practice it at the beginning of your project, it will tank the entire thing. It's called optimization, and it will take about 50% of your time as a 3D creator. Now, no one wants to talk about performance because, well, there's not a singular answer, and it's kind of a nightmare. So today, I'm going to try something new and have a discussion with professionals all about the nuances of optimization. We'll talk about what it is, how flat design has tackled this problem in the past, the skills you will need to be good at it, and how design tools are tackling it today. Now, this is a long one, so timestamps are down below. And if you like this new format and have any questions about it, let me know with a comment. So let's get started. So today I'm here with Corey Bromell and Raph. You just Raph to me at this juncture. Real quick, will you guys introduce who you are and then we can jump into it?
Hey, I'm Corey. I'm a designer. I've been designing in this arena for about 6 years now. Used to work at Microsoft, just spent a little time at Adobe, and now I'm working at Bezie doing some product design so people can create spatial prototypes really easily. Before I worked as a spatial designer, I was a motion designer for film and television. So I've been around for a while, making a lot of content. Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm Raphael. I'm the design advocate at Bezie, and my background is quite wide, but I'm mainly in visual communication background. I mainly started in print, went into activation design while working at advertising agencies, and also social media and digital social media advertising as well. But now I help designers like you get into spatial design at Bezie.
Sick. We're all Bezeiites, whatever. But this discussion will basically help everyone out, regardless if you use Bezie or not. So I'm going to ask you guys a question, and then we can get into the weeds here. So why do you think so many designers struggle with the concept of performance in their XR designs?
I guess I'll start. I think nowadays, most design tools are quite mature. They've already solved, like most 2D design tools are quite mature, and they've solved quite a lot of the things that many designers have to accommodate for, such as file sizes. Nowadays, like if you were to upload your images onto even websites like, let's say Webflow or even WordPress, would normally automate that process for you in terms of optimization.
So you personally believe that a lot of designers today have their hands held with a lot of optimization, and we'll talk about kind of the past of that optimization and where it used to be here in a second. Corey, what are your thoughts on this?
I can speak for myself. I think one of the issues around performance is it's an afterthought. It's like after you've planned the project, after you've built all the things, after you've done all the development, then it's a thought after. And then it's, by the time a lot of designers realize that performance is not optimal, it's too late, too far down the road, and they just kind of go with it. And so thinking of it as an initial thought can really help. But yeah, I think a lot of designers just don't think about it until it's too late.
I think that's a good point. First of all, I would say that today, it's a little bit interesting with XR, especially in this 3D medium, because there's a lot of expectations of mediums that have preceded it that look really, really good. And so a lot of people's expectations of what they want to create in a headset is based on unrealistic expectations set on by other mediums. Now, XR is predominantly a lot more intensive, but being able to interact with things in real time and keeping up a solid frames per second in your headset is incredibly difficult. You know, performance, one of you said when we were talking about this earlier, is kind of a variable. So I think a lot of designers are having such a hard time putting their finger on or really understanding performance because it could be one of a million things inside of your scene that needs to be played. So it's all about intent. It's all about, it's kind of like a hidden language that we must decipher as designers and creators to create content. So like with that, like let's go back in our time machine a little bit. I think that all of us have been in this industry long enough where we kind of remember the past of, you know, web optimization and mobile app optimization. Now, I'll start off by talking a little bit about that. Like back in the day, we used predominantly rasters to do everything. We either used Photoshop or Illustrator, but you know, Illustrator could only handle vectors to a certain extent, and Photoshop couldn't handle vectors at all. They had this give and play until we got really Sketch in around 2012 and 2013. And because of that, I think that a lot of designers, especially young designers, don't understand what it used to be like to actually create content for the web and mobile applications. Like Corey, like, can you reminisce a little bit about that?
Well, probably going to show my age here a bit, but I remember doing graphics for movies, and we would actually do on-set graphics, so they'd had to play back in real time. So performance was really important. It couldn't sort of like chug along, and you'd have to like render out your sequences, image sequences, and then optimize them using like the tool we used to use called Debabbilizer. Nobody knows what that is anymore, but it would basically take everything down and to 256 colors, but you could generate like what they would call a CLUT file, which is a color lookup table, and then it would optimize your sequences with that color table. And it was like really tedious and hard, and you never really ever got there. It was always a compromise, right? It was always like, oh, do I want it to be a little unperformant playback and look better, or do I want it to be performant and kind of like have a lot of banding and gross stuff? And that's what I remember from back in the day before we had vector graphics, was like this constant trade-off between quality and performance.
I think we're seeing that a lot today, especially in video with like rotoscoping. All that stuff is becoming infinitely easier, but there's always going to be people who remember these things, so to speak. I mean, Raph, how have, like, in your past, like, how did you handle optimization for the web and mobile?
Well, maybe I want to switch gears a little bit from mobile to, let's say, print, because that's a little bit further back, but it's still relevant today. And in terms of print, optimization is making sure that your color set is at a certain, like CMYK, or maybe even you'd have to consider Pantones as well, right? And nowadays you can use Photoshop files and everything. But in terms of that, you had to know how to optimize your digital print files so that they translate nicely into the print medium, right? And even in print, designers' hands are held by the system, right? It's been optimized so much that designers don't even really need to think about even shifting or optimizing the print files for the print medium, because
so, and it's interesting because a lot of these tools they really relied on a lot of us, like especially in the digital space, relied on the silver bullet of the SVG to fix a lot of issues. And I don't think that the SVG was really supported in many browsers until Chrome came along and the death of Internet Explorer. But, I think that with the rise of Figma and stuff like that, it became a lot easier, and designers have become essentially siloed, and they don't really know the cost of what they build, but that's a different discussion. But one thing that I also want to say that changed the game of people, like designers having an easier job, was the rise of like the human interface guidelines and material design, because a lot of designers get a lot of patterns for free, or they can style existing patterns. So sometimes optimization isn't about like taking a raster graphic or a 3D file and stuff like that and making it a lower poly count or changing the size of the maps of your product. A lot of it is just how things inherently work and how things are built. And today in XR, fundamentally, there are really no handouts for that. The HIG exists today with Apple Vision Pro. And I think that it's really, really powerful, but incredibly limited. And honestly, it doesn't really represent the power that, we really need to make the medium of XR incredibly powerful. And Meta stuff today, they announced Horizon OS, but who knows when that's going to come out. So we're kind of in this quagmire of people having to hand build everything, and that means everything is just going to be a lot harder to optimize and get to work correctly. And I think that that's kind of what I'm trying to say at the end of this segment, which is like there is no single silver bullet for XR at the moment. Everything is still raster based. Like there are new set standards or patterns that have been really established. And if I'm going to be using the terminology of a silver bullet, we need multiple clips of a silver bullet. And if each one of those takes between 5 to 10 years to create, it's just going to take a very long time. So your job as an XR designer is going to be for a long time understanding how your product is going to work. And I think that is going to be around 50% of your process. And I've talked to a bunch of different game designers and developers, and they say basically a lot of the time they're just trying to figure out how to get things to work from a performance perspective, but they often lose track of the design itself because they're so intertwined. And so that's something to take into consideration. So let's move like a little bit further. So if people are still a little bit lost and they don't understand, we keep saying performance, performance, performance. Let's talk about like the direct impact poor performance is going to have on your projects, and why when you build stuff in Bezier or in Unity or stuff like that, things may seem laggy or slow. Raf, what is the biggest impact of poor performance?
I mean, there's a few, but I'll focus on like one, which is resolution. Right? So many designers nowadays are used to designing everything in very high fidelity, right? 4K, because they now have like their fancy new MacBook Pros or something, right? And they want to design at the highest fidelity because they paid for it, right? But the thing is, those high resolutions that you're spoiled with now, these head-mounted displays, because the resolutions tend to take up a lot of that memory, right? Like let's say a 4K texture image on a device that has been optimized for mobile, but running two different screens at 120 hertz per second is not going to perform well with a 4K texture on it.
What's interesting about that, though, is that as XR gets more popular, brands are sort of buying into it, and they're building these out-of-home experiences. And brands care deeply about what their products look like. Like imagine if you're like a car dealership, and you're going to put an XR car outside in a square somewhere, right? As like a location-based experience. That car's got to look good, or they're not going to do it. That's what they care about. And so immediately you want these sort of 4K textures, and you build it in high res, and it doesn't always translate to XR, but there are tricks you can do, of course, but I don't think people are super aware of these quite yet, and it's not easy, it's tedious. Yeah, resolution's interesting because they go straight for the high resolution stuff. They're used to print, they're used to like video. Yeah,
sure. And I would say that we try to bring in all of these things fundamentally, especially into XR. It's really going to impact the user experience in general. I'll tag Corey here pretty soon. Is that the thing that matters probably the most to people is comfort in spatial computing, and is probably one of the biggest things that we have to overcome as an industry from an ergonomics perspective. The heavier your scene is and the more it's trying to do, you're going to see a drop in frame rate, which can make a lot of people sick and can make a horrible experience. So like, one thing that Corey brought up that was really interesting is that this isn't just for deliverables to the client. This is, the concept of false results while even trying to prototype something with poor performance is something to take into consideration because, Corey, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So like I've kind of had each of my past jobs were kind of two different goals. When I was at Microsoft, we were really trying to figure out enterprise software, whereas Adobe, it was a lot of branding stuff. Those need two different things. So if I'm building an XR experience for brand, it's like I just talked about resolution, things need to look good and be a good experience, end-to-end experience, so people enjoy it. And then often you try and like call to action at the end to get them to go buy something. Whereas when I was at Microsoft, we were really trying to figure out software and interactions. And the core of a good XR interaction is how it feels. And sometimes they're pretty subtle. And if you can't capture that subtleness because your performance isn't good enough and things are lagging, you'll never get good signal about how something should feel to people. So as designers at Microsoft, we were constantly thinking about performance and making sure our hover states and our button interactions and how our panels moved were performant, so we could get the real feedback of what it's going to feel like for someone. We had a lot of occasions where it wasn't performant and you just couldn't dial in the precision you needed when you're prototyping real software for real humans.
It's definitely interesting because I think a lot of the time we don't consider trying to manage performance while we're just trying to get an idea out there. So performance isn't something you just do at the end of a project. It is something that you have to build in as soon as you start a project. And I think that's really tough. And we'll talk about how we can work on that in a bit. But let's briefly talk about what impacts performance. Now, Raf has already talked about large raster graphics and maps, and I think that's a big one. Yeah, there may be a lot of individuals who may have heard the thing about poly count should be under a certain range. And I think that kind of exists, but it's a lot more nuanced than that. So if I was going to give three fundamental things that really impact performance, I would probably say it's going to be lighting and shadows, materials, and maybe poly count. I think those are the big ones, because with lighting and shadows, you know, your headset's trying to calculate twice at a high resolution in real time how light is affecting something with physics. And depending on your materials and how they're crafted, like bump maps and stuff like that, it's going to make it a lot more difficult, because a lot of the time, a lot of the maps that we use are trying to fake the concept of depth. So your computer is doing all of this massive juggling trick. And depending on your GPU and CPU and what kind of resolution you're pushing out, it is just going to take everything and smash it to a halt. Raf, if you were to give 3 things, you can copy me if you want, that like are the biggest impacts of performance, what would they be?
I mean, it's exactly as you said, like the poly count, shares, and what you call this, and lighting. You know, those negatively affects the frame rate of your projects.
I mean, I would also say draw calls, but we can talk about
That's what I was gonna say.
Okay, go Corey, go Corey.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously materials, like you should keep everything like 512, maybe 1K if you don't have many of them. A lot of people go immediately to 2K. A lot of 3D applications default to 2K. So that's good to keep in mind. But yeah, draw calls, like this is how many times is a, how do you describe draw calls? It's a bit weird. Help me out here, guys, if you have a good definition.
I think it's a number of how many renders it has to do per second.
Yeah.
How many passes. So, you know, the ideal, if you guys ever use Blender or anything like that, when I was starting out in Blender, everything I made, even if it was a duplicate of something out, was a completely new object. Mm-hmm. And so basically the system had to, you know, draw that again, versus if I have one blade of grass and I make it an instance, it's only rendering technically one blade of grass, and then it's just replicating. It is instancing.
There's some variability too, right? Which is if you're building an AR experience and someone's walking around an environment, how many pixels are filling up the screen at any given moment will affect performance. So you could have one object, but it filling your whole screen will reduce performance. Whereas if you have 10 objects, but they're small and they're not filling up your entire screen, doesn't have to render your whole thing, that's less in the AR. So it's very interesting. Like it's variable, as we'll probably get into.
Yeah, and in Unity they use things called occlusion culling to try to reduce the amount of things that are rendering in your scene. Now, if you're a designer, and there's a million other things we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about topology, physics, animations, all of these things. It just and there's not one there's not one single issue that you have to take into consideration. And sometimes you can be a lot more liberal with these, but fundamentally imagine making all these decisions for one specific device and then having it trying to, you know, go across all devices. And so as a designer, you have to be very, very aware of your product.
I think a good thing to think about too is what is your outcome? What are your desired outcomes for your experience or your thing? Some people might be okay having a little less performance, but a really high quality singular asset in the scene. That might be exactly what they want, and that's fine. Then you can have a little bit higher textures. Some people might want a really smooth, nice animation, and then you have to sort of compensate in other areas. So there's this constant give and take depending on what your goal is, what you're building.
I mean, I absolutely agree. And I mean, a really good example is probably a recent trend like PlayStation 1 graphics or PlayStation 2 graphics. They're coming up again. You know, people love nowadays, like the younger generations love this aesthetic, this retro aesthetic. But that aesthetic came about because of the limitations of the devices that they were on, right? And that aesthetic gave rise to some, interesting art direction and within the limitations that really gave those eras that signature look that people love nowadays.
100%. And it is interesting because when people look at bad graphics, I don't think a lot of people understand why. I mean, they're like, well, the technology wasn't there. But, if you look at an old Nintendo game, the entire audio package was like 2 kilobytes. Like all of the sounds, all of the audio in games had to be meticulously crafted to run in real time over and over again. Like Donkey Kong Country is probably one of the most masterful soundtracks ever crafted just because of the structure of it. Even Mario is insane. But let's move on a little bit and talk about what skills do you need to optimize and to make your product better.
Well, I think the first thing you need to understand is at least fundamentally, is the 3D software, how it works, how textures work, how UVing works. These are all things that are difficult. They've always been difficult, and they probably will be difficult for the foreseeable future. You know, I was talking with a colleague the other day about why is 3D so hard, and to be clear, like XR design is very much linked to 3D animation and modeling and creation. And there's just so many things that go into 3D that people do. Like there's modeling, topology, there's texturing, there's lighting, there's animation, there's UVing. And so all of these things you need to get good at in order to understand how to optimize it the best. I'm still learning. I've been doing it for a decade and I'm still learning how to get better at it. So, but definitely a good fundamental understanding of how polygons and topology works and how you texture those with UVs would be fundamental to even getting close to any kind of good performance.
Let's just stick on 3D modeling here, because I think in a lot of my videos and when I talk to people, a lot of individuals get really scared off 3D modeling because it's difficult. But I don't think you need to be a master at box modeling or any of these features to actually get a job or to be good in this space. You just have to understand the medium in which you're painting with. But, you know, Raph, what do you think about 3D modeling and stuff like that? Like, where have you kind of settled into the 3D modeling journey?
So in terms of my skills, I'm definitely much stronger in 2D design. However, I've managed to augment it by limiting or settling for something that is a lot more achievable. I've settled for low poly graphics. Now, low poly graphics allows me to two things specifically. One, speed up the modeling process. And two, like not dedicate too much time into the actual 3D modeling process. And I find it's a lot more achievable to do stuff, right? So it's sort of like, you know, steps until you get to that higher state. So, you know, I tend to try and lean into my strengths and then augment it with extra skills that I might not have to make my skill set better.
And I think that when I look at the stuff that you've been making, Raph, one thing that what I commonly do too is atlasing. And for those who aren't aware of what atlasing is, that basically you combine all of your colors or all of your maps, or I should say all of your like materials to a certain extent on a single PNG or JPEG. Now, how long does that usually take you, Raph, to do?
Ooh, it depends. It depends on how crazy I want to go. Do I have only a few days to tackle it? Usually crunch time, I try to optimize or plan out my scene as much as possible and try to make the most of it. It's all about maybe planning ahead is always a good way to go.
So I think planning ahead is kind of like, if you're going to be sculpting, if you're going to be painting, if you're going to be doing anything like that, feeling your way through is not really an option. If you're going to create a mural, you're not just going to go and just randomly start painting. You have to understand your canvas really well. And I think one of the things that Corey talked about is what I call visual fuckery. Do you want to jump into visual fuckery?
Sure. You know, I come from sort of a visual effects background, and the art of that is like basically trying to figure out stuff on the fly, tricks and tips, and XR is no different. Imagine you're building an XR scene. You have like a hero object that you really like, a shoe, like Raph's example of a shoe, but you have stuff in the background. You will, a lot of people initially would think you got to build all that stuff in 3D and texture it, and you get away with you get a lot of leeway if you just use 2D planes in your background. It's like two faces, right? And you can have it like constantly facing the viewer as a behavior in real time. So you can do stuff like tricks like that to sort of build out your XR scene, add some fidelity to it without really increasing the overall performance hit. So that's one thing you could do. I'm a huge fan of sort of understanding your goals too. Like if you want to do a prototype and you don't really care what it looks like, you're trying to figure out how things feel, then you don't need high fidelity there at all. You can just use materials. But if you really want to have something look really great, I strongly recommend learning something like Substance Painter. You'll get 10x your visual quality if you can learn a program like that. It's a little difficult entry point, but basically it's like Photoshop for textures. It's great.
Yeah, I can figure out how to poke around Substance Painter, but I do think that it is kind of the key, especially when you get into being able to bake your light maps onto there. So
100%.
you can fake geometry and you can fake that stuff. So like that stuff is cool. I think one of the things you talked about, Corey, is the visual fuckery. What we're doing as designers is that we're magicians and we put up a curtain for people to see. And in front of them, it looks like magic because we're controlling depth, we're controlling hierarchy. But behind the curtain is just a bunch of rods stuck together with duct tape that are moving in weird ways.
That's
and
right.
so like, it's like something that you could do that makes your life easier. Is like if you're trying to do an environment, you don't need a tree in your scene if it's like 100 yards away. You can have an image of a tree. You could like, you don't need to do those things. You don't need to have your entire world mapped out for you, right?
Right, and these are two tricks that they've used in visual effects for decades. You know, you have to think more like a set decorator than you do an XR designer if you're trying to populate your scene. How big, if it's going to be 5 pixels high at maximum, how high fidelity does that need to be, right? Like make it just a card.
I love visual fuckery. I think one of my favorite examples is not design, but it technically is. It's from World War II, right? And I think what they did is that they dressed up an airfield to look like it was full of like trucks and planes. They put inflatable trucks on this airfield to make it look like it was full, and they managed to fool the opposing force, right? So I mean, even examples like that, right, where they use like inflatable trucks is great visual fuckery in real life.
Hey, honestly, and it's kind of like one of my favorite things to do, especially with Raph's files, because every time Raph creates something, for the most part, I go poking around like a little gnome to see how he did stuff. Honestly, like the designs that get me the most excited is the stuff that looks cool that you don't notice completely, but like is just smoke and mirrors. It's just the cleverness of a design.
A lot of like AR especially is sleight of hand. Like the whole thing is an illusion. So why not propagate that to your optimization and performance as well? Like the whole thing is an illusion. So
yeah, awesome. Let's switch gears real quick to how tools today are and how people today are attacking performance. The first thing I can say, and either one of you jump in, is that fundamentally no one's figured this out yet. There's not a single trick to solve performance. There's not a single answer. And I think that's what makes attacking the performance problem, especially from a product design, so difficult. And one thing that I have noticed about a lot of design performance tools today, and I'll show some examples here in a second, is that everyone's trying to take an approach of giving enough information to their users to make an educated decision about what to do. But the problem with that is there is no single like thing to find and to fix. It could be a number of different problems in the space. I mean, Corey, what kind of experience do you have with that?
Well, everywhere I've worked, we've tried to tackle performance to varying degrees of success. And everybody across the board agrees that it needs to be tackled and dealt with. And we want to make tools that are informative and helpful to try and help people create performant experiences. But trying to define what good performance is really difficult because it, as we found out, it always depends. And then you do know what good performance is, and you do know where the problem lies, why someone's experience isn't performant. But how can you tell somebody to go that's a tough one. Retopologize a model, or tell them that their textures are too large. What does that mean to someone that doesn't have a certain level of knowledge of this stuff? Like when you say your textures are too large, does that mean physically or resolution? What does that mean? And if it's too big, how small should I make it? Right. So there's a lot of sort of esoteric topics and vagueness to the solutions and the problems.
Why don't I just do this? Why don't I just do this? I'm going to switch over to this dude right here, and we're going to do this is what I call the Daniel audit. Okay, so at Bezi, everyone on like this call has been working on this problem of performance. And so what I did during my audit, which I love doing, is I went through Unities, I went through Spline, I went through WOMP, to try to figure out how they're solving this problem. Now, Unity's whole issue here is that they give, and this is very pixelated, so I apologize, that they give so much information and so much data that even people who work a lot in Unity often get a little bit, it's a labored process, but they have decided to really dive into the nitty gritty of performance because that's their gig. Their gig is to make device specific performant products, right? And if we go through here, like understanding that what all this is just incredibly chaotic. Even if we come down here to the summary, we're going to see like native, managed, all of this stuff are committed memory versus managed memory versus top Unity objects categories of what is taking up the most. Now, if you're an average user, you're probably not going to understand what any of this means. Now, this is what I would call a very reactive structure of performance. And I think for Unity, it may work. But when we get to like a competitor of ours, which is Spline, they're trying to tackle it in a way that they're trying to be more proactive and reactive. They want this middle ground, because I think that what you were talking about, Corey, is specifically what a lot of people battle with, where it's like, how do we tell people how to solve their problems? So what they basically do here is that in order for you to check your performance in Spline, you have to go to export, you have to go all the way down here, it says run a test, and it gives you all of this information. Now, the thing about this is that this is no way accurate because it's probably benchmarking your computer, but even then that's really difficult. This isn't on a device perspective. So they try to take a reactive approach by showing you all of these things and giving you helpful hints, and I completely understand why they did that. But then they try to do the proactive, which is basically saying avoid using high subdivisions when possible, and they give you a whole list of objects that have issues. Now, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. And I think that's ideally where we all want to be, is we want to have this proactive approach or this holistic approach into solving this problem. But it's never that simple, because I think that if you fundamentally give people solutions that they may not understand, you'd have to be very, very sharp in how you deliver them. But then you also, if you have a magic button that says change a object from, say 20,000 polys to 10,000 polys, it's going to destroy, your object may not look good. Your materials may not be wrapped properly. It just creates a lot more issues. Now, before we bounce into Bezi and we start talking about that, do you guys have any thoughts about this stuff?
I think it's always going to be, it's never going to be perfect because you don't know people's intents. You don't know what knowledge they have around performance. Like if you give them some good advice on how to fix it, you don't have any idea whether they understand what that means or not. So I think it's always, there's no perfect answer to this. I think we'll just have to whittle it down over time, and get it right. And hopefully devices get better and better as well. And then we kind of meet in the middle somewhere.
Before we dive into how we're trying to solve these problems, let's define the problems. And we've been kind of alluding to it. And that is, I would say, number one is literacy. To become literate at performance and design is a skill unto itself. And teaching people and educating people on how to be literate. Raf, what do you think?
No, I absolutely agree, because not everyone will understand all these nuances, right? No one knows exactly what resolution you need to go for, or I mean, even if you were to upload anything on social media, you don't remember all the sizes of whatever social media you have to upload to, right? So you don't know it off the top of your head. You don't know what what to tackle. And one thing is to, specifically for Bezi, you're also designing for a number of different devices at the same time, from desktop all the way to mobile. So yeah, I mean, what do you focus on? It looks great on your desktop, but will it work on your mobile phone?
One of the things that we always found difficult to decide on at the other places I've worked is, if you know something's not going to be performant on the device, do you let the creator do it anyway and let them get into trouble? And there's been long debates, and there's good reasons to have both. But both times that this has come up, we decided that you can educate them and do your best. We didn't have an optimization tool, internal one, where we could change things. So, but we decided just to let them kind of like get into trouble. And sometimes that's better than just not letting them upload things that won't be performant, or choose options that won't be performant. But I always thought that was interesting, that there was this constant debate about, should we even let people do things that will get them into a spot where they won't be performant.
Yeah, I think that it's like analysis paralysis can kick your butt. And I'm talking to a lot of game developers. A lot of what they say is they spend as much, if not more, time on performance than the actual design, because they want it to work. And so it's a delicate dance. So let me switch gears real quick, and we're going to look at a scene Raph made. And I love this scene. It's gorgeous. And this scene right now, according to our performance meter, which is brand new, is not happy. Now, there's a million different reasons, but instead of going over what's wrong in the scene, which is, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the scene, you can flag and still have a performance scene. It's just, that's just the way things are to a certain extent. As I said, there are no like finite answers to this. But when we created this performance tool, we were kind of saddled with this old debate of proactive versus reactive. And what, as someone who worked on this project a lot, what I've like figured out is that in order to diagnose the sickness of performance, we had to understand performance and what was wrong. And I think that there was a lot of internal debate in our company that like, we want to tell people exactly what's wrong, but then we realized that's not an easy thing to do. So what we've done is we created this performance panel that you can designate any device you want. I mean, in this case, all of them are flagging, and we have grabbed as much data as we possibly can in the scene and created benchmarks that are being holistically crafted month after month to be fed into this, to actually give people insight into basically designing this. So right now, if nothing is selected, if we have this overview, it tells us how many geometry. Raph was able to do this with 19,000. That's sick. We have 76 meshes. The highest polygon is 6,700, and we have all of this stuff. And you can dive into these things individually and preview them over here and get all of this information. So like, this is the geometry size. This is the polygon size. If we go to materials here, you can look at all of these things individually. Now, one of the hardest things that we're going to have to figure out as designers, especially on this project, is that our demographics are so incredibly broad. There's a lot of people who come into our tool who don't know what to do. They don't know what works, what doesn't work. And they may enter performance and trying to get things work at the last second, which is horrific. But then you also want people to start afresh. So if I, for instance, in Bezi AI, I'm going to grab this rocket and dump it in. And if I look at performance right now of this thing, we're going to see this rocket by itself is around 50,000 polys. Now, if I right now in desktop, there's like a cap right now on desktop of around 1 million polys because it's on desktop. But if I say Quest 2, we're going to start flagging this out. And it's not because of the poly count, it's because of this resolution map of 2048 by 2048. Now, one of the hardest things that I want to figure out is like, if someone wants to change this, how do they do that? Or explaining to them why, their material size is so big. and how do they like how do you be more proactive in that way? And I think that's something that is like we're gonna have to work on, but we also want to be like we don't want to hit them over the head with it. Like when you guys use the performance tool in Bezier, like how do you like what are your guys' opinions? What are your insights?
For me, the one thing I like about it is it's real-time update, right? Like it's like as if I add something and I everything starts to get flagged, I can be like, oh, that's the last thing I added to this scene that's causing the problem, instead of having to pull the scene or do an analysis. I think that's really helpful as you're building out your experience or your scene. I like that.
For me, I think it's probably the analysis tool, and how it segments everything from high, medium, and small, and how like if you use the drop down changes the analysis tool changes the high, medium, small based on the drop down device that you've selected. But also one other thing I like is the opportunity section. I was looking at that, and that changes too, and it gives you some suggestions on what you could do in terms of like how to make your file more performant based on the device that you selected. So that for me was quite useful, right?
Yeah, and so I think when designing, I guess the performance tool in Bezier, the hard part is that we needed to release something that gave enough insight, but wasn't going to lock ourselves in analysis paralysis, which started to happen. We created this tool, and what we started to see is the performance of our own product. And we wanted to optimize, and it's made our product better. But at the same time, it's like getting something out and getting signal is kind of the key for all product design. And this is kind of the key for any product you work on, especially if you're prototyping. So I guess like the good thing about this is there's a million opportunities to solve these problems. And I don't think it's going to be solved overnight. I think it's going to be an ongoing battle with performance. But my goal is that if anyone's watching this 3, 4, 5 years from now, hopefully 2 years from now, you're going to start seeing this stuff quickly evolve and being fixed quickly. And I think AI is going to have a major role to do with it. But that kind of AI means it has to be integrated into the heart of a product instead of just on top of a product. And I see a lot of AI being, thrown on top of products right now, and so they can sell it. But it's really about the invisibility of AI and the invisibility of reducing performance, where you don't have to think if it will work, it just works. But my questions for you guys in the comment section here is, did you guys find this useful? How much experience do the users or the viewers of this have with optimization? Is the concept of performance new to you at all? And what scares you the most about performance in your work? Now, again, I also want to ask, I guess, another question, which is, do any of you guys watching find this kind of content useful? I want to do more content like this. I love having my gang here, and we have a lot of things to talk about. And I think some of the times the best way to learn is by, finding content out there that could answer your questions or to give you food for thought, and then you can start exploring about it. So real quick before we sign off, where can we find you guys online?
You can find me on Twitter or X, Corey Bremmel. You can find me on LinkedIn. You just type in my name, I'll be there. I think that's about it.
Yeah, for me, the one I tend to the most is probably LinkedIn. You can find me there typing in Rafael Gregor Valencia or Rafael G. Valencia. And Instagram to see some of my work, which is Digital Addict at Instagram.
Awesome. Well, this first format went pretty well. Well, thanks, guys, for joining me today. Until next time, everyone, take care and plus minus. Okay. Thanks, guys.